This piece is entitled On Beauty. It's dedicated to my stepfather, Samuel DuBose. Happy birthday, Sam. On Beauty. I had just finished shaving in the shower when I stood tall and thought to myself that that's all that I'm shaving. To ask a person to change their natural selves just seems so degrading. To accept, love, embrace, cherish, and nourish one's natural self is the true essence of beauty. This form of self-love emits through the individual as an aura of confidence. Confidence that is gained from knowledge of self and recognition of one's own uniqueness, to where this individual is not threatened by or alarmed by the uniquenesses of others. Because instead of feeling this way about the quality of others, beautiful people cherish and love the uniquenesses of themselves. Of these people who are threatened by the uniquenesses of others, they are more prone to comparing themselves, and in doing so, they assess themselves to others who they perceive as having better qualities, physicalities, and uniquenesses than of their own. But instead of reflecting upon these subconscious beliefs, they project their beliefs onto the confident individual and say of them, they think they are better than everybody else. This assessment is wrong in that, because beautiful people love and cherish themselves and are not threatened by the uniqueness of others, they feel no need then to compare themselves and assess a betterness of them over someone else. They are able to recognize and appreciate the uniquenesses of others because they have been able to do the same with their own self. Those who are threatened emit the ugly spirit of jealousy that stems from the lack of self-love, but that is wrongfully being directed onto others in the misguided beliefs that the confident person has done something of ill intent. If you have read the Bible stories, then you know that jealousy was truly the first sin. Beautiful people go on to be successful because rather than stagnating themselves in comparison of self to others, they nourish themselves, improving themselves, growing into a better version of themselves. Beautiful people unconditionally love themselves and therefore are some of the most beautiful mothers, lovers, friends, and people because they too unconditionally love others. The beauty of this love is that those who are embraced by this unconditional love can become so overwhelmed by it, so accepted by it, that to see someone love them unconditionally, they begin to question their thoughts of their inferiority and remove the self-imposed barriers that kept them from loving themselves. Beauty has little to do with physical attributes, for socio-physically beautiful people can always become consumed by the ugly spirit of jealousy. And why? Those who may not be considered socio-physically beautiful are called beautiful because of the confidence this individual has from their self-love and self-acceptance of their uniquenesses. When threatened individuals allow themselves to be so consumed in their jealousy, they eventually attack the perceived better, yet confident person. These are mostly verbal attacks as a means to bring that person down or to try to convince others and themselves the confident person is not greater or better as they have already secretly thought them to be. This creates bullies who either attack the perceived better person verbally or physically if they lack the mental capacity to verbalize themselves effectively. Those who are easily threatened gravitate to others who share this in common. They verbally attack the confident person amongst themselves, engaging in gossip and spreading rumors. A beautiful person instead acknowledges another's strengths and weaknesses, but builds that person up in their strengths. A beautiful person is not threatened by the favor of another's uniqueness, because they do not need external acceptance since they have already accepted themselves. Those who are threatened are more prone to fear in that, when they subconsciously believe another to have a better uniqueness or that they themselves lack or are inferior to another, they fear subconsciously that they cannot compete with the other's uniqueness. This grows into a fear that they will lose their position, whatever position they felt they held that the perceived better person did not, but could easily take. This kind of fear can be seen in the faces of races where the flaky crusted donut of fear is stuffed with the gushy sweet jelly of jealousy. And it's general knowledge that cops love donuts. To understand how police officers came to love this brand of donut and eat of it regularly, we must know the ingredients and how these donuts were made for their natural attraction to this particular group of individuals to occur. We need the following ingredients before we begin. milk, sugar, salt, flour, eggs, yeast, butter, cooking oil, and favorite jelly flavor. First, we will take and pour the milky European settlers and slave traders into the bowl of America. Be sure that the bowl belongs to someone else first, and it's their only one. And even though the person offers you to use it, take it. Take it and keep the bowl for yourself to ensure that they cannot also make delicious donuts, or anything else for that matter. Now that you have acquired the bowl and have your milk in it, add lots and lots of sugar to sweeten with the created identity of whiteness as a means to distinguish the difference between the enslaved Africans that are being beaten mercilessly, the owners of your now acquired bowl, and yourself and your friends. Next, just add a dash of salted white superiority complex. Just a dash, though. You will want all the immigrants coming from their European countries to also acquire a taste for these donuts later, and too much of this will leave them unable to eat of your donut too. Next, we will mix these ingredients with the white doughy government and establishments that were created by white men, for white men. Make sure that this brand of dough portrays itself as healthy and good for all people, but is really only to feed and give nutrients to a particular type of people, white people. Now add into this mixture the sticky yolk of institutions, educational, religious, social, etc., that will make these previous ingredients stick and resonate with people who identify with whiteness for years to come. Ah, our donuts are coming along nicely. Now, let's add some yeast to give rise to the fear that has created the perfect temperature for those police officers while we wait for the oil to heat up. Where does this fear come from? Well, after we've created and mixed all these ingredients thus far, it seems that we didn't account for the fact that there are bakers of goods cooking up things too, and one of those being African freedom. Prior to this, the only law enforcement were of two forms: volunteers who were designated night watchers for communities, who were heavily unreliable and unaccountable for, and slave patrollers. It is these slave patrollers who we look at. They were made up of men within the community as a mandatory rotated duty. They were composed of wealthy white men, poor white men, slaveholders, white business owners. All the diversity of whiteness that can be found were found in this group. Their jobs were to watch for runaway slaves, to beat and instill fear into the slaves so that they would not have rebellions. Basically, they were to watch and protect the investments of white slaveholders. But some of these volunteer patrollers didn't always catch runaways, and with very little incentives to do so, there were institutionalized changes to their position to ensure the capture and return of investment, ROI. The first established police force created from these previous slave patrollers was in 1838 in Boston. Shortly afterward, in areas like New York, Chicago, and eventually Cincinnati in 1853, police establishments were created. It wasn't until 20 years after the granting of slaves freedom that all major cities had established police forces that were composed of previous slave patrollers. It looks as if the oil is heated to proper temperature, so now our nicely rolled donut structure can be dipped and fried in a society that was created to solidify false beliefs and heat away critical thought and moral responsibilities. Once we have the flaky crust we so desire, we take it out, create a small hole, and begin the filling of our donut with our favorite flavor of fear jelly that was particular to the realization that the now freed slaves outnumbered the whites of the land. This is when we invite all of our European friends over to help our numbers grow. But while they become accustomed to our tasty treat, the slave patrollers will stay on payroll to keep the Africans in line. Not only is there realization that the Africans outnumbered the whites, but these Africans had skills that the whites didn't have, which meant jobs would have gone to them due to their skills. But the beauty in this is that after going through hundreds of years of enslavement, harsh and brutal conditions brought on by the created whites, those freed Africans didn't in turn do or seek to do the same to their counterparts. Instead, they unified and created their own communities, their own schools, their own businesses. They maintained themselves. They lifted themselves and each other in their unified strength. They nourished themselves and their communities. They thrived and became successful. They created and motivated one another. They sought to learn more about themselves and their past prior to the brutal interruption of their great legacy. And though they did this amongst themselves, their white counterparts saw this and questioned, what was it about them that led these previously unfortunate people to be so resilient, so strong, and so innovative? They compared their progress, which was established and catapulted by the African to begin with, to these newly freed Africans and saw how quickly they were catching up and in some cases surpassing them in their own efforts. The ugly spirit of jealousy had shown itself in the white faces and has led and continued to lead whites carrying this spirit to purposefully attack Africans, including those whites who carry that spirit and are employed by the state as an officer. It is all these ingredients and variants thereof that have created the current culture for donut-loving, donut-eating police officers of today. They often say that you are what you eat, so my only assumption then is that on the day of July 19th, 2015, police officer Raymond Tensing had had his fill of donuts before encountering Samuel DuBose. That he had been full of the many flaky, feared, crusted, jelly seed, jelly-filled donuts, that his only means of getting rid of his perceived threat was to annihilate it completely. That he had recognized the greatness that was flowing within Samuel DuBose's veins. That he had seen the resilience of Sam's ancestors upon his face. That he recognized the innovation of and spiritual and mental strength that contributed to his perceived greatness, betterness than of himself. That in moments before Sam's murder, he was so overwhelmed with the jealousy of this man for the greatness he had perceived, that he was so overwhelmed with fear of this man's greatness being able to easily outdo him. He was so consumed by the fear of the realization that Africans like Sam DuBose are outnumbering his kind, that his privilege of whiteness was being washed away by the many melanated faces and beings that he was in constant contact with, that in a donut-induced attempt to make a statement, take a stand, protect his whiteness, he took the life of a man who never asked for a sample of what Reid was eating. He took the life of a man who had learned to love unconditionally. He took the life of a man who had learned to love himself. He took the life of a man who built others up in their strengths. He took the life of a beautiful person. And though he took the life of Sam, he did not, could not, and will never be able to take away his beauty. That is the beauty of beauty. Happy birthday, Sam.